Morning, everyone. Right, I'm going to get us started. Welcome to Strategy Cafe. I'm going to start with some technical notes. So, what would be amazing during today's session would be to chat. If you have arrived and you're on your Zoom portal, maybe just go and see if you can find the chat button, and message out to our guest speakers today as well. If you're looking at chat also while we're chatting, you might want to just drop it down and change the option to everybody. So that way we can pick up messages and we can, if you are going to type back, you can speak to everybody on the call this morning. So we're going to talk, I'm going to introduce everybody in a minute. We're going to talk for about 45 minutes on recording. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the recording off at about quarter past, and allow anyone who's still here just to come live in a Chatham House space to ask a few questions and come on mic at the end. So hopefully that's okay. So let's get going. Today we're going to be talking to Mairi and Martin, and they're going to introduce themselves in a second. And it's really lovely to see everyone here as we talk about how to help families get to agreement. And it's one of the most common problems in family businesses. How do you even start helping them start to get help? That's kind of nicely put, I think. And so I'm going to introduce our guests in a second in the topic. After a brief poll, we'll get into it on how you feel about this idea of sales, where you think you're good at sales, and how you frame sales, how you experience sales. I think is also a really interesting thing. Before we get onto that, I just wanted to point you at our Strategy Cafe podcast, which is a YouTube podcast. Here it is. And you can see the link at the top of the page there. I've put the link also in the chat at the top, so hopefully you can see that. If you can't see that, just let me know and I'll repost it. So the first link in the chat is the link to our Strategy Cafe playlist. There are 73 videos up there, including a couple we did recently. So one was about harnessing energy with Professor Dr. Kashdan, and the last one we did was about our 6 points on getting investment ready, which has been very popular. There's loads in them. There's over 70 recordings of lessons in business and life, all kind of brought to life by leaders who've really experienced them. So it's a fabulous resource, and I really encourage you to go have a look at it, go dig around in it, and find things that are going to be useful to you and your colleagues. So, good morning, Mairi and Martin. Maybe Mairi first. Do you want to give us a quick intro? Tell us about you, and you're on mute.
Thanks, Nick. Thank you so much for having Martin and I on today. So I am a family business advisor and coach. What does that mean? I help families when they are going through transition. So that could be generational transition through the business, bringing in your rising generation into your business, bringing in a non-family CEO, thinking about your ownership. Is it going to your children? And now with yesterday's budget, how is that going to happen more soon, that conversation perhaps? I spent 12 years on the board of my own family business, which is turning 100 next year, Mickel. We're a construction business in Glasgow. And I still am an active owner of that business. I sit on a couple of boards, family business boards, and I'm a visiting professor in family business at Strathclyde University in Glasgow. So I have lots of different roles, but at the centre, the core is family business.
Absolutely amazing to have you today, and welcome to Strategy Cafe. Martin, tell us about you.
I am a former monk turned sales coach. I help nice people sell more. I love psychology and complex, tangled problems. And to help people get better dynamics, communication, alignment, agreement, so that they get to make a decision that is in the interest of everybody.
Amazing.
And I write a lot.
Well, you need to say you're an author, and I've got your book. I've got your book here for everyone. So tell us a little bit about this. Here we go.
Well, Sales for Nice People is the product of 30 years of obsession with human nature and behavior. I've always wanted to figure myself out, and that is one of the reasons I went into a monastery, to learn myself. And in the process, I learned how to also empathize with people and how to have conversations with people that enable them to move forward. And that gets translated into a more pointy kind of approach for having sales conversations, which is in the book.
So everyone, you can see it there. Go hunt Martin's book out on Amazon. I heartily recommend it to you all. It's absolutely fabulous.
Thank you.
And I'm sure he's going to be sharing some of his insights with us today. So I guess the framing for this is about how families and business together can get really stuck with making a decision. And even to this disempowering position where they are unable to make a decision. They're not explicitly making a decision to do nothing. They just can't do something because they can't make a decision. And often the first thing that happens is, as advisors, we meet them with the problem, but they can't even get over that line to appoint some outside help. And so really we're talking about sales. And so before we get into the thick of things a little bit, I wanted to just get a sense of what everyone on the call today feels about sales. So I'm going to launch a poll, which just asks you 3 simple questions about how you experience the sales process. So there you go. How do you experience the sales process? For you, is it just a necessary evil? Do you find it essential but uncomfortable? Or for you, is it an enjoyable act of service? You just share the results. So maybe that's not unexpected, but nobody thinks it's a necessary evil, but most of you find it essential but uncomfortable. And a couple have got to that place of actually it's an enjoyable act of service, which is wonderful. So that's kind of where we're going to get into, I think. So let's just frame this a little. I think that when we have this issue of families and business together trying to make a decision to get help, you know, there are lots of pressures pulling against getting help. You know, members of the family business can feel really fed up with each other, like annoyed that they've got a problem to deal with. And, you know, that can be a real hindrance. You know, why do we have to pay for help? You know, why can't you just stop making trouble? Right. And that's a common thing. They can feel really exposed about talking to strangers about their private troubles. Right. There's this sense of exposure, annoyance that they have to reveal what's going on privately, maybe some other difficult emotions like shame or what have you. Yeah, and then you know you can get a sense of hopelessness, you know, due to past failures, you know, and worries that it's pointless getting help. You know, it's just pointless because you know, last time we tried it just didn't work. So all of that can be going on. I'm just going to stop the share so you can see us a little bit more clearly. Yeah, so I think that's kind of going on in the background. I think one of the other things that can really happen is that when there's a real argument or a difficulty or problem to solve, it's quite polarizing. And so there's this question of taking sides. You know, polarizing sort of means just taking sides. And often what happens is if one person wants to bring somebody in to help, they're immediately perceived as being on their side, right? That also is a huge problem. Yeah, so I think all family business advisors wanting to get started face this conundrum. And Mary, I think when you were talking to me about meeting Martin, who you were very generously introduced me to, and I found absolutely fascinating. I asked you the question, so you know, why did you get help from Martin about this? So tell us your experience of this problem of getting a decision.
So probably I've been running my own coaching consultancy business for about 12 or 13 years. And I've found that during the first 5, 6, 7 years, I would get a referral or I would meet a family business client. And invariably, you meet the person I would call Cassandra, and we can come on to talk about how I define that and what that means later. You'd meet the person who had the most enthusiasm and energy for change. And I would often end up, exactly as you said, getting perceived by the family as that person's agenda driver, and that would stall the sales process. So that was one thing. The other thing that would happen was families would all have a different idea of what the problem was. And so whenever I was meeting new family members to do what I would call a chemistry meeting, which is prior to the sort of sales conversation and contract signing, I would find that they would be in so much disagreement about what the problem was that I couldn't get them to agree on the problem, and therefore get them into an agreement on the problem and the agreement into a sales process that helped me help them with their problem. So when you mentioned earlier, the problem is the problem, and that shows up in the sales process. So I ended up having coffees with people sort of on and off over a couple of years, or the sales process would take so long. And I noticed Martin smiling, and, you know, I'd be wasting time, quite frankly, and I would be giving away free consulting, because during that time, some people would be wanting to pick my brain for ideas, but actually, did they ever have any likelihood of developing those ideas that I was supporting them to understand better within their own difficult decision-making family? Possibly not. So I was finding sales were taking too long, and I wasn't defining my ideal buyer, and I was spending too much time giving free consulting. So those are my sort of layers of challenges. I met Martin on Twitter. He is a Dutchman but lives in Spain, so I'm not very likely to have come across him face to face. And we just started talking, and I did his sales growth program initially, and we realized that we had quite a good connection. And I presented to him these 3 thorny challenges I was finding in getting into contract with family business clients. And I was hearing the same from my fellow advisors, not just people that coach and consult like me, but also lawyers, accountants, wealth planners, you know, all sorts of professional people around the space. And Martin and I started really during COVID and lockdown, when I had a little bit more time on my hands at the beginning, to consider how can we shorten the sales process? How can I learn to weed out the people that are never going to get to appointing me earlier? So learning to say no to clients. And also a big challenge for me, which was sort of charging more and being more confident about my offering as well. I think I'd taken so many knocks. Obviously, I had lots of great clients, but I'd taken so many knocks in the way that I'd lost a bit of my confidence in my value to clients, because they showed up with decision deadlock, and I thought, oh, I've not been able to handle that. There must be something wrong with me. So I guess in a way, Martin was really coaching me through that and helping me develop a sales process, a way of weeding people into contract or out of contract earlier, and really helping me define my value and my associated fees. And helping me define my ideal client. So it's been a very rich relationship for me in getting clients through earlier, or actually stopping meeting them for coffee and giving them free consultancy.
I'd love to get your perspective on. Thank you so much, Mary. I'd love to get your perspective on this, Martin. So, how did you see Mary's problem?
Mary didn't seem to value herself and her capabilities as much as she should. So one of the challenges, one of the things we worked on really was for her to take a stand as a uniquely valuable resource to what I call to be the prize, right? Very often when we try to enroll a buyer, we end up trying to chase them, win approval, be valued, and get their okay, as if the client is the prize. And to a degree, of course, winning a client means that you win a prize. But at the same time, you are one of the very few people who is able to properly serve this client and get them to break through challenging, old, painful problems. And that makes you the prize. And it is very important for an advisor or consultant to not fall into that trap of chasing and trying to win approval. You are there to vet your buyer just as much as your buyer is there to vet you. And that shift in attitude, where you're approaching the entire process from a non-needy point of origin, enables you to have far more effective sales processes and more useful sales conversations with your buyer, because it's no longer about getting them to hand you the brownie and say, here you go, here's the money, now you can start your work for us. It's about working together with your buyers to an agreement that finally gets them to own up and take charge of the problem that they want to solve. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Mairi, do you want to come back on that? How did that feel for you, that shift?
Yeah, it was profoundly helpful. I think part of what was holding me back was my own bruising exit from my own family business, which I left about 13, 14 years ago before I set up my consultancy, in the hope that there'd be another way to help family businesses transition and not repeat the mistakes that we had made. So I think part of that was building up my confidence in understanding that I was the prize. Definitely. Martin was very good at that. And also he helped me realize that my experience was something incredibly valuable.
Oh, yeah.
And made me much more comfortable with using my experience to be part of the road to credibility and not be so keen to prove. And that was incredibly useful.
I think just in this early kind of conversation, it's already kind of reframing your identity within a sales process, right? So, and I think what I'm hearing is reframing the identity in the sales process as a valuable resource. Really settles you back down on who you should be as an advisor anyway. Right. So one of the nice things to say, I think, right up front is that we're almost stripping away the idea of the sales process, but we then need to add a little bit back in, I think. So, Martin, when we were talking about this before, you talked about how you then come towards the questions you want to ask. And I remember when we were chatting about this, do you remember you just leaned forwards and talked about a certain way of asking questions? And tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, I was recently called the man with the most annoying questions in the world. And so I think that's a good starting point. I call it pointy questions, right? So very often we try to ask questions that move the sale forward. It's the typical, the yes ladder, get people to nod their head and then go for the sale. And that is mechanical, and it doesn't help your buyer. So the way I approach the entire process is making people think, asking questions that help people develop clarity and insight. So it is a modality very similar to coaching and therapy, where you're there to hold a space in order for this buyer to develop insight that enables them to make a decision. So a buyer needs to have clarity on what is the best choice. And the best way to hold a sales process is to make that buyer's choice, even if it is to not buy now or not buy from you, to make that your mission. Right? So I like to say that it's not your business whether somebody buys from you. It becomes your business once they do. And up until that point, your only business is to enable and facilitate a process of developing clarity that enables them to make a decision. And that then turns the sales process into something that's inherently fundamentally helpful. So even if they don't buy, they'll remember you as somebody who was useful and in support of their challenges.
Martin, if I can add to that, something Martin's taught me, which is incredibly useful in family business advising, on top of what he said there, is that when you realize that this is not going to be a client because it's not the right time for them, that's so often what we have in our clients. It's just not the right time. Something else has to occur and then they might come back. Martin's taught me to do what we call leaving a pebble in their shoe.
Yeah.
So asking them a really good question as they're exiting, you know, and giving that almost as a gift, also kind of a small pebbly sore gift, so that they hobble around a bit for a couple of years and then they phone you back. And this happens now that I've been in business for over a decade. I've had many, many clients that I had a conversation with 4, 5, 6 years ago, and the pebbles got too big, or the whole situation has changed. And it's, you know, but because I left them with that gift, that pebble, in a way, as comfortable. This is not the right time. That's fine, on you go. But, you know, have you thought about this? And then they come back to me. So, I mean, that's very worthwhile.
Yeah, amazing. I wondered if both of you could kind of bring this to life a little bit. So I think it's a really good description, but what is a pointy question? What is a pointy question like?
Well, imagine that you are talking to a champion in a family business, a Cassandra who sees the necessity for change, somebody who really wants to get everybody around the table so that we can start working on this problem. But for some reason or other, this person doesn't get that done, cannot get everybody around the table, voice not being heard. So this person then is powerless, and you want to help that person. You cannot help them with continuous free consulting and endless coffees. So one of the nice questions that I like to ask, pointy questions, is what is required of you in order to get everybody around the table? Now, this is something that if you're talking to the right person, will not leave them alone. This is the pebble in their shoe that's going to keep them thinking, what do I own here? What is my responsibility? What is in my power? My abilities? What resources do I need? How do I need to change my thinking, my communicating, my behaving in order to instigate this change that we all need so badly? Now, that is a pointy question. It's a pebble in their shoe. Ask it of your buyer, because that not only keeps them thinking about the interaction with you and the potential, it also forces them to own up to their self-awareness and their own responsibility in the process.
Yeah. It's a beautiful question, isn't it? Because it places them back in their real state, which is that they're grown up and they have agency. And I think one of the issues that we have with the person that reaches out is that they're sort of seeking dependency. I need to find someone I can be dependent on who will sort this out for me, and that's not how it's going to work, right? Does that make sense to you guys? It's not going to happen that way.
And there's also the fact that people by default look for others to change in order to solve the problem. Now, if you want to solve a problem in a system, whether it's a business system, family system, or political system, you need to become the problem. You need to decide that the only change that's going to happen is change in me. Because when you change other people, or you try to change other people, well, you know how that goes. It's frustrating and it doesn't work. And things tend to get worse. So instead of trying to change others and putting blame out there beyond you, make it yours. What can I do? What is my own option, potential, possibility for changing the way I interact with people? How do I modify and improve my own interface so that it enables other people to go through their own change?
Yeah, such a beautifully put point, Martin. So we're entering here into the really difficult concept of acceptance. And I think sometimes this gets misunderstood. So when we talk about acceptance, people often think it means accepting people with all of their faults and just almost giving up on things. It's like acceptance seems like it's giving in, but it's not. It's a radically different thing. It's embracing your burden fully. And it's a reframe away from some of the difficult feelings that you can have about it, from maybe annoyance, resentment, anger, hopelessness, all those reactivity type feelings about the situation, and instead stepping into a place where this is my lot. What can I do? This is my lot. What can I do? And I think it really asks these beautiful questions about identity. And I wondered, we talked about Cassandra, and it came up on the conversation we had. What is a Cassandra, and is that identity helpful or unhelpful in this context?
Well, I was thinking, I've been using the term for such a long time. And then yesterday, when preparing for today, I thought, actually, I can't remember where it came from. It was so long ago. And it came from this book, which I'm going to show, which is Margaret Heffernan, who's a sort of business psychologist. She's a wonderful woman, called Willful Blindness. Cassandra in ancient Greek mythology, there you go, easy to say, in this time in the mythology, she was royalty. So she was the daughter of Queen Hecuba and King Priam. She was beautiful. Apollo fell in love with her and gave her a gift. And the gift was prophecy, yeah? So she could see everything. But she spurned Apollo. So he retaliated by adding to her gift the fate that no one would ever believe her. So she can see everything, but no one believes her. Super frustrating. So she was the one that warned the Trojans, don't bring the great wooden horse left on the beach by the Greeks into your city. They ignored her. So today, why is it relevant today? I see a lot of Cassandras in family business. They still have superior knowledge and they sort of embody that kind of baffled rage of, why does someone else see what I see? They can be the epitome of frustration. And sometimes that's the first person who presents in a family business system to us. But because she's sort of doomed to always be right, she showed us that the truth is knowable. And if you spend time sitting in that truth and getting insights in the sales process, we can have that, but it won't always necessarily set us free. So those are the Cassandras, the people that often come forward and say, I need you to help me. All this stuff is going on in my business as a result of the family dynamic. And more often than not, one of the things, I do two things when I see those Cassandras, is to either, if they are not ready to enter into a personal coaching program, which will help them build up their own capabilities to sort of enter the system with me as a consultant, at the point that the system is more ready to make a decision. Yes, we want Mairi, we need Mairi, we're going through transition, we're stuck. If they're not ready for that, then I will leave them with some tips for aligning other stakeholders and wish them luck. And Steve's put a great question in the chat. What sort of person do you have to be to move the business forward? Great question. And I would add to that, and what's the true cost to your identity of being that sort of person? Because the Cassandras can end up with that, being doomed to always be right, which can be hugely difficult for them. So yeah, that's what I mean by Cassandra. I hope that is helpful.
It's such a beautiful illustration, and I really love. Baffled rage is my phrase of the day. Thank you for that. That's almost a song track. It's a song title, Baffled Rage. I really love it. So there's this idea, and Steve's talking about it here, about challenging your Cassandras to take on a slightly different identity, and then getting them to consider the cost of that, but also, I guess, the gain of it. So can they face the reality of it more fully and accept there is a cost, but there is also a gain to be had. And I just wonder, when you're coaching Cassandras in this early stage of the sales process. And this is free. This is free coaching at this point, right? So, where do they find the resourcefulness for that slight identity shift from baffled rage to useful energy?
Martin, I'm gonna let you answer that, because I think I was probably a little bit in this place when we met, actually, and you really helped me shift.
People have a lot more ability to achieve results, change, and instigate better conversations than they typically credit themselves for. And a lot of the struggle and challenge is in not being able to, let me see how I phrase this. You see, I was worried about you and your pointy questions, Nick. This is you were going to do this. When you see the need for change, when you have a voice in a system, but you cannot get people to align and have a conversation about what the problem is and what should be done to solve it, then the default is to look for fault in other people. It's because this one doesn't want to talk, and the other one is always throwing a spanner in the works. And it's always been like that, and Jimmy is always the one who, right? So then you externalize all the responsibility to other parties. And the only way that you can really make any change happen is by basically ignoring other people's faults and looking at what is in your own capacity and capability, what needs changing in how you see yourself inside of the system. What is
Yeah.
the next identity that you need to acquire? What is the role that you need to play, the archetype that you need to lean into in order? And so this is kind of similar to fake it till you make it, but it's not anything to do with faking. It is about behaving in a certain way, an ideal archetypal identity that you can identify with, and you can start showing up as that person. And the first challenge and decision to make then for that person is to, like I said, to become the problem, to look for any solution within your own approach, your attitude, your behavior, and your communication. Unless that happens, this person is never going to be able to get other people around the table, because ultimately you're then just going to show up telling people that they're wrong and they should just come to the conversation. Well, you tell people that they're wrong and they're going to reject anything that you try to get from. So you need to make yourself wrong in a sense.
Yeah, no, it's such it's a really eloquent answer. So that takes me straight in my mind to like a way of thinking I have around this, which is I call it gods and mortals. And so maybe it works with the idea of the ancient Greeks and the Cassandras. Gods and mortals like immediately step out of the river of thought of being the mortals. So you're no longer on the plains with a Trojan horse in a battle. It's a gift, blah, blah, blah. All of that kind of blame and shame and worry and anxiety, which is fully enveloping as a kind of a real narrative, like a story that seems like it's real. And instead, with gods and mortals, you just say, right, come up to heaven and let's stand as the gods and look down at those people down there, and let's look at the characters that are in play in this great battlefield. And I thought that was a really nice link into you two wanted to talk about this as a more complex environment, so getting beyond that first interaction. Martin, I think you had something to share with us around seeing this in this way, so seeing it as a system. Do you want to, is this a good place to bring that and to share?
Sure. Yeah, we put together a couple of thoughts that might be helpful for people. So when there is decision deadlock, the most common cause is lack of alignment, and you cannot bully people into alignment. You cannot force people to start looking at things the same way. What a lot of consultants experience is what we call the free consulting trap, where you have one sales conversation after another and nothing keeps moving forward because this champion, this Cassandra, isn't able to get people around the table. So what we try to do is find a way to empower and enable this person. And there's three options, basically. So either you give them your best advice, including books and resources, but also pointy questions on how to engage with other family members in order for them to hopefully over time create that alignment and get people around the table, and off they go, and good luck. If you are a coach, then personal coaching can be a really great first stage to build up this person's leadership and communication capacities. Or you would have to, if you're not a coach, if you're a more technical operator, recommend a third-party coach who can take on that role and support this person through that phase of building up the leadership.
Can I jump in?
Why? Yes,
Can I
please.
jump in here, Martin? Nick, to tie back to your point on the gods and mortals, I think it's partly that's what the empower and enabling bit is, the individual that's presented saying we need change. It's kind of come out of the river, look from above and think about what are you aligned on already? How can we build more alignment in your family business to make sure that you can reach a decision about what kind of help you need, identify the problem and move into, insight and alignment. So I think I'd quite like that idea of Greek mythology of that's what people do. They need to sort of make a choice that I'm coming out of the river and I'm going to look down and understand, oh, that's how the system looks from up here. It looks like this, and I also play a part in that, and it's possible to move.
Yeah, and what you said there about system, right? This is something that a lot of people don't really consider enough, that a family business is a system in and of itself. And it's an incredibly complex system because you've got the family, you've got the business system and the ownership system.
Yeah.
And these all interact and interplay, and there is all kinds of stakes and stakeholders, each with their own interests and gripes and missions and values. And for you to go and try and talk to one or two of the family in order to try and create a contract and land a client might mean that you're overlooking a lot of the complexities and the dynamics that are at play. So, Nick, is there?
Yeah, may I just make an observation,
Yes.
Martin? Just, I don't. Sorry to stop your flow because
No, that's
it's
fine.
really important. But just to build on this, so one way to see this is this. Just from me, I see this as energy systems interlocking,
Mm-hmm.
and that they create heat.
Mm.
So the
Or
family dynamic
smoke.
quite often is heat and smoke, yeah, and
Yeah.
because of the frictional needs between the different systems, there's a push and the pull
Mm-hmm.
that's going on, and quite often it's hidden, right? So the smoke is good. It's a great language because although in the family system everyone might be aware of some wires that are hot, they might be
Mm-hmm.
private to just two family members, and so everyone knows about it, but they don't know specifically what's going on, but it's always present when we talk because those two are always locked in that heat. And
Mm-hmm.
so, it's complex, this, right? Sorry
It's
to disrupt
extremely
your flow.
complex. No,
Yeah.
that's fine. And what you say there about heat, I like the saying that every system, every machine can be a smoke machine if you use it wrong enough, right? So a family business is a machine in a sense. It is a system that operates with all kinds of interacting parts.
Hmm.
And a lot of the time, there's smoke coming off the thing because it's not being used, managed, or operated in the right way.
Yeah.
Now, if you are an advisor, whether you're a coach or you're an accountant or a
Hmm.
family planner, you
Hmm.
have to be able to recognize what dynamics are going on and in
Hmm.
what way your Cassandra or first point of contact needs to go out and interact with the wider system.
Hmm.
What kind of conversations this person needs to have.
Hmm.
So we put together a couple of questions that might be helpful. So in you assessing what is going on in the business and in the family and the system, which is the system that causes the biggest obstacle and which system needs to be brought round? Now, that is not always the same system that is the biggest obstacle, right? So maybe in the family system, there is an enormous conflict because of shares and inheritance. Who knows? Now, it might be very difficult to get that around. But if you go and then try to talk to the ownership system and try to create change there, that might cause influence on the family system that then gets the family to sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah, no, it will. It will.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What system can be used as an enabler or leverage, or who in which system should you talk to or should your Cassandra talk to in
Hmm.
order to start changing the dynamics?
Hmm. Such a beautiful way of thinking about it and looking at it, and there are a gazillion ways of
Hmm.
finding useful. And so I think one of the things I like to think about is that there's lots of truth which is not helpful. And people will tell you about that all day long. Who's to blame, what happened, why it's a
Hmm.
problem, etc., etc. There's lots of true but useless information that comes out.
Hmm.
There's a few little bits which are true but also useful, and this is a
Hmm.
great way of hunting for those little gold nuggets
Yeah,
of
and I think
actually just
Mary
how
will
we should.
have quite a bit to add to this as well. I get on my talking stand, and Mary, please, what's your take?
Thank you, Martin. I think part of this as advisors is if we come back to that image that we're standing beside them in the clouds looking down, is helping individuals and family members see that there is a nested system of parts. There are three parts. And there's 8 different positions within that diagram that somebody can hold. And actually, over time, inevitably, when you work with family businesses, you have been brought in because the problem is in somebody moving, needing to, being asked to, or wanting to move position within there from one position to the other. Often somebody's right in the middle. They're the owner, they're the leader, they're a family member, and actually it's time for them to drop one of those hats off. And it's slow and painful. And there is a response to that because the system has ripple effects, yeah? And so somebody else, maybe it's the CEO has come to you from the business system, they're not an owner, but they've said, can't work with the owner anymore. They overturn my decisions every day. Said they would retire, but during COVID, they came back in every day, and it's been the same ever since. We've seen those things happen. That's a normal presentation of problems. And so actually it's important for us, I think, as advisors to stand beside them and help them understand all that is at play. And I really get, when I come into contract, I really spend a lot of time, what I call my discovery phase, actually diagnosing the health of all of these parts of the system and presenting that back in a way that the client can understand. But it's early work of that through the sales process, so that people start to open up their thinking. Oh God, this is why it's painful. Because actually I'm moving from being a family leader, the CEO, the senior member person of the family, and the majority shareholder. I'm selling my shares. So I'm moving position in the system. And actually, are other people coming into that? And how do we plan for that? And how do we talk about that? So communication and planning, key points. But yeah, we wanted to use this today to really sort of bring to life why this is complex, and a bit of sort of, you know, this is a very widely available model and was developed in the 80s as family business thinking sort of arrived and started off. So it's old now, but actually it's still incredibly useful, I think.
Oh yeah.
And as advisors thinking, you know, who is it? Which part of that system is presenting to me? And, you know, as they're talking, almost populating, okay, so they're worrying about tax planning, they're worrying about death, they're worrying about financial security in the future. Oh God, my kids have to run this business in a way that I'm still going to be financially solvent into my 80s. You know, you start to populate around that system some of the things that you're being told by your client. And I think we'll always have to reframe that in a way so they know that they have a choice.
And are there, maybe Martin, I can ask you to stop share for the moment so we can just get back for everybody. But I've got a question, and then I wanted to return the conversation to the start, if that's okay. So my question, thank you very much for such a rich share, both of you. That's fabulous. Are there other roles? And you know, eight identities that someone could hold, and maybe there's multiple. Maybe they're holding multiple hats, right? So even within that thing, but are there other roles that talking about our Cassandras?
Mary?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I really understand your question. Other roles for who?
So within you've got that beautiful complex family system. Just before we got into that, we talked about the Cassandras. You know, so they could be in any of those spaces, right? And I guess, you know, quite commonly, you know, somebody somewhere in that system has reached out for help. So they're taking on a role which is external. They are taking on a role which is external to that system of I am going to be the Cassandra, right, as well, which isn't obviously just defined within that. So I just kind of wonder if there are, you know, in your minds, just also other roles outside of the family system circles that are real, you know, playing into the problem of decision making.
The patriarch, time and time again. When I told my dad I was going to leave the family business and set up my own business and what I planned to do, he said, "Why don't you call it getting rid of dad?"
Yeah.
Which actually he was the first of our family members to leave alive. So he did a good job of his own succession planning. I said, that's perhaps a little niche. But actually the patriarch comes up time and time again, that person who sits in the center, who still isn't doing their ownership succession planning, who's really scared. And I understand that of, if I leave, will I have my lifetime of hard work acknowledged? What is there meaningfully for me beyond the business? So the patriarch can often be another really big chunky role, as it were, if I'm understanding your question correctly, that I come across in my work. And also trying to influence my process. I find that as well. I'm writing your check, so let me tell you how it's going to be. So that's it. It's always an interesting challenge to overcome in creating alignment and getting sales.
Yeah, you know, such a beautiful archetype, the patriarch, and desperately trying to control,
And it's
avoid.
fear. It's fear of the unknown, and I understand it. And as I've aged, I've realized it's not the rising generation that need our help. It's those people. It's the older people who are not necessarily going to be elders in terms of wisdom, and they need some help to become elders in their thinking.
we were gonna talk about fear, but I'm gonna push that off to the post-recording chat for people that come on. Let's talk about fear in a minute. And Martin, did you have something to contribute to this, to other roles?
Well, other roles, one of the archetypes I like to get people to lean into is that of stewardship.
Mm,
Right. So when you feel that change is necessary and others are not playing ball and you can't get them to join a conversation or get around the table, then you, as the one who sees the need for change, have a duty of care and a responsibility of stewardship in order to show up in the most helpful way. You care about your family and the business and all the people in it. And this goes back to that ownership and responsibility part. In what way do you need to show up to, what way does your buyer need to show up to the whole smoking machine in order to facilitate the most helpful and fruitful type of dynamic and conversation
mm,
possible?
mm,
So the steward is an archetype, that a role that I think is extremely powerful.
mm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great
it's
point.
lovely. Yeah,
And it takes the conversation out as well and into the long term, which is
it
where,
does.
and away
Yeah,
from conflict or pointy stuff. And
Mm.
yeah,
what are you stewarding over time, and takes them into an ancestral thinking rather than
yeah.
what's directly ahead of me today and tomorrow.
Mhm.
I love that, and we call that writing the right history. Thinking about the
Mm.
history that you're creating. Let me just take it back as we close up into the sales process. So we had this kind of interesting idea also, and this is just a question about another role. That sales is an act of service. So I'm interested in both of
Mm.
you, just as we center back as where we started. How is that the case for you?
Want me to go first? It's a bigger picture case for me in regards the important place of family business in the UK economy and the
Mm,
importance of having a long-term approach to business practices and
mm,
the very many brilliant things that family businesses do in the socio-economic success sphere, as well as financial. The business has to make a profit to be able to contribute to your communities. But actually, for me, the act of service is that it's about trying to create a sort of business legacy and take away the focus constantly on startups. They are important, and some of them are the family businesses of the future, but let's throw more thinking into business continuity.
hmm.
That's
Amazing.
for me, the act of service is around that bigger picture piece.
Mm. Yeah, and for me, it is the distinction between serving people once they buy or before they buy. Right? So if you are here to serve your buyers, to serve your clients, then the common thinking is that, well, once I get paid, once the contract is signed, that's when I start serving my people.
Hmm.
My philosophy is that no, from the very first moment that somebody shows up in your world and says, can you help us? That is when you start serving your buyer.
Hmm.
In, like I said, helping them get clarity on this extremely painful, problematic situation that nobody has been able to resolve. Get
Hmm.
them to clarity, get them to insight, enable them with methodologies and modes of communication that start making things better. That is an act of service in itself. So each interaction with the buyer should be something that leaves the buyer feeling that this was useful. Because
Hmm.
then, for one thing, you won't get ghosted so much when you follow up with people, but it's
Hmm.
also a way for you to turn your Cassandra into an ambassador. So the more
Hmm.
helpful your whole process is with every step of the way, the more likely it is for this person to start promoting you inside the business, which then
Hmm.
hopefully over time starts getting people curious about what you do, how you work, and why maybe they would also want to talk to you.
Hmm. Thank you so much. Thank you, you too. So I'm just going to grab back. So we just transition now to some Q&A. I just want to kind
Do
of
you
sign.
want me to just
Oh,
do you want me to share the final questions because you like questions? We had a few questions. Do
oh, please.
you want me to share them?
So I need to drop the share.
There you go there.
Maybe we could put them in the chat, Martin.
Can do. Yeah.
Yeah. Will you put them in the chat so we can then get everyone into the Q&A space?
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sounds good to me.
Thank you. So I'll come back to this. So this is where we're at. So helping people make a decision in a little bit in the dark, and it's a lovely slide. This, I think, the idea that dawn is ahead, and I guess this is kind of nicely kind of frame this idea of sales as an act of service. Is helping people make a good decision, get moving in the right direction, get things moving in the right direction. I'm very privileged to have had you both on the call today, and thank you both very much for your time and for sharing so widely of your experience with everybody. So next time up is going to be on the 28th of November, and we have this beautiful guy, Alex Atherton, that some of you will know, ex school head, and he's a fabulous coach, but his sweet spot is really around this intergenerational misunderstanding. And quite a lot of the politics of our age around how some young people are snowflakes, and his experience of turning that around and talking about it from another perspective, from deep experience, just really fabulous around kind of generating some level of better intergenerational understanding. So please register for that. The registration page will be up as soon as this session is finished. Alex is just a fabulous speaker and really interesting topic. And then dealing with difficult, which is our regular monthly masterclass. We've done the first two and feel like I've rolled into this rather quickly. And we are going to slow down, but it's very important to me to then talk about harnessing emotional energy, because I think that's the thing that people find the hardest. Well, certainly that's what our feedback from all of our psychological flexibility survey says. Most people find it at least 20% harder to harness than all of the other EQ skills that they have. And I think this is because emotion is like quicksilver. It's quickly in the blood, it's running in the veins. Once it's there, it's there. And if you're not in control before it happens, you're already way out of control when it's happened. So, is there a different way? And this is probably getting into the heart of things, and then we can build the skills to get there. But next session, which is next week on, I think it's Thursday at 1 o'clock, which may be a better time, we're going to be talking about how you get into that better way. So go have a look at that, and we hope to see you online. And this is what it looks like. So if you get into Substack, which is where all the material around dealing with difficult is, you can find me there. It's a beautiful place to write and to share. And then this is the Dealing with Difficult page, where all of the subscriber tools and the podcast videos are, so you can go back and have a look at past sessions and get back into it that way.